Howdy folks, welcome to Live at the Lazy T Ranch. We must be at the Lazy T Ranch because that's what it says on the sign up here. So we're here at the ranch entrance, a little different location today. My name's Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate. Liz Wilson is doing the video today. We've had like 3 inches of rain plus over the last couple of days, so we're nice and wet and soggy here at the Lazy T Ranch. Today we're going to talk about cattle brands, and I'm also going to answer one of our most frequently asked questions, so stay with us. I do want to make one historical note. Today, May 26th, happens to be the birth date shared by 2 of the greatest Western stars of all time. On this day, May 26, 1907, John Wayne was born. And 16 years later, on this day, May 26, 1923, James Arness was born. He would go on to play Marshal Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke, 2 of my all-time favorite Western performers born today in history. So happy birthday to those 2 great Western stars. Let's talk about cattle brands. When I go into the store, which 3 months ago I wouldn't have thought twice about, but when I do get into the store, I see lots of brand name products all over the shelves. And I see Pepsi, and I see Kleenex, and I see Kellogg's, and I see all these products. Their brand names are represented there. So I know the company that it came from, and I can identify that symbol and those words that represent that company. When you stop and think about it, cattle brands are kind of the same way. And we're going to talk about cattle brands today, including the brand of the Lazy T Ranch. So one of our FAQs, one of our most frequently asked questions is, why is this place called the Lazy T Ranch? And so I'll share the story. In 1958, this place was purchased by 3 Manhattan businessmen, Richard Ambrose, Cecil Hunter, and Ted Lundberg. And they said this ought to be a ranch and it ought to have a brand. Now there's different ways for naming ranches. One way is to identify a physical characteristic of the ranch. So it could be Rolling Hills Ranch, or it could be Hidden Valley Ranch, but that sounds like a salad dressing. A more common way was to use the initials of the ranch owner in the name of the ranch and the design of the brand. So, in this case, Mr. Ambrose and Ted Lundberg got together and they took the A from Ambrose and the T from Ted and they put them together. They made it an open A and a T. Now, in brand language, the way that the T is placed and the symbolism that goes with it makes a big difference. If you have a T with wings, that is a flying T. If you have a T in a square, that is a box T. If you have a T with rocking chair feet under it, that is a rocking T. But if you put the T on its side, like me laying down when I'm being lazy and taking a nap when I'm supposed to be working, that is a lazy T. So the brand they designed was an open A and a lazy T, T on its side. And they called it the Lazy T Ranch for short. And if you look carefully at the ranch sign, you'll see the name Lazy T Ranch, and right below it, you will see the Lazy T brand. And that is how the Lazy T Ranch got its name, and we've kept that name ever since. What is the purpose of branding? Well, that brand, that design, was used in the old days to be burned into the hide of every cow, every beef animal on the place, so it would represent the ranch ownership, just like brand names in the store. It would be a symbol of the owner, and wherever that calf would go, people would know where it belonged. For a cowboy in those days, it was a very important skill to be able to read brand language. Just as today it's important for our kids to be able to read words and to know the alphabet, it was very important for those cowboys to read the brands, to know the symbols and know where they belonged. And so, just as we read left to right, if you're looking at a brand, a design, a symbol, you know to read left to right, top down, and outside in. So for example, that T in a square, if you were reading inside out, it would be T-box. Well, that sounds like golf. But instead, you read outside in, it's a box T. The brand not only identified the cattle, but it also became a symbol of the ranch. And it became, I'm I'm wearing it on my shirt. It became like a logo of today. It became a very important symbol that the cowboys would identify with and have loyalty to. How did they do branding in the old days? So in the 150 years ago, there would be a roundup, and they would gather in the cattle, and the cows would already have been branded, but they had newborn calves, young calves. And so a cowboy on horseback would rope a calf, he'd bring it over to the branding fire, and in the branding fire there'd be a big campfire with these branding irons. And so the end of the branding iron was heated in the fire, and on that end the branding iron was this metal implement with a handle, and then the ranch design was on the other end in metal. And so then they would take that hot branding iron and they'd take it over and stick it on the side of that calf and burn that brand, that design, into the side of the calf. Did it hurt? Yes, it did. It would sting, but not for long. And after that, if that calf was ever lost, people would know where that calf belonged, and the ranch would have that ownership. Nowadays, there's still a few ranchers that brand. Nowadays, virtually everyone is using these plastic ID tags that are just clipped into the ear, kind of like getting a pierced earring, and they have a numbering system, or can be used to identify the cow or calf. I think where the industry is headed is an era of traceability, and we want to be able to know where every animal came from, and so we can trace back those animals. So we're headed to, I think, a system of radio frequency ID tags. Kansas is a pioneer in this. That's kind of a short-range microchip that goes on that plastic tag, and then it can be read by an electronic reader or scanner. So we'll be able to trace those animals, where they came from, and know the conditions they came from in case of an animal health problem. So we still have cattle brands registered with the Kansas Division of Health at the Kansas Department of Animal Health at the Kansas Department of Agriculture, but not many of us are actually branding today. So let me finish up our Facebook Live session. I'm going to walk around over here on the other side of where our sign stands. And we'll finish up with this poem about cattle branding. Just like a brand name on a product at the store, a rancher's brand, sign, and much more. It's burned into the hide of a cow or a steer to identify the cow's owner out on the frontier. It might use the initials from the owner's name or a ranch characteristic which might serve the same. The brand served as a symbol of the ranch with pride, whether a flying letter, walking letter, or a lazy letter on its side. A cowboy learned quickly to read a brand so he could identify cattle all over the land. He'd read left to right, top down, or outside in to determine the herd that the cows belonged in. Most of all, the brand proved cattle ownership, so no one could steal them with an unscrupulous trip. When it came to their ranch, the cowboys loyally took a stand. That's why we always say, we ride for the brand. So that's the background on cattle branding. We had this branding iron made to represent our brand. It's a genuine branding iron. If you look close, you can see an open A and a lazy T on its side. So that's the true story of how the Lazy T Ranch got its name. With that, folks, thanks for joining us on Facebook Live at the Lazy T Ranch. Be safe, be well, and as the sign says above, happy trails.